On today's episode, I'll discuss how Laurent Brossoit's injury impacts the Blackhawks and Leon Draisaitl's extension in Edmonton.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, just a quick reminder to hit the like button, comment down below, and especially subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. I'm currently on the climb to 2,000 subscribers and would really like to hit that number before the regular season gets underway in October. If you're tuning in through an audio platform, please make sure to go and rate and review as well, preferably with a 5-star rating. Those are always great. And last but certainly not least, please make sure to go and show some support to today's title sponsor, which is FanDuel. You can go and check out FanDuel.com/lockedon right now to download America's #1 sportsbook. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Again, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. Hope everyone out there had themselves a lovely Labor Day weekend, spending time with friends, family, loved ones, being outdoors, enjoying the lovely weather, at least for those here in the Chicagoland area. I know the weather was quite spectacular over the weekend. I spent time down in the city, catching up with some of my buddies, watching week 1 of college football. And by the way, we're now officially in the month of September, Blackhawks fans. And speaking of college football, when September rolls around, that's usually what people initially think about. And I mean, rightfully so. I'm definitely excited about not only college season having returned, but also the NFL being back underway this week as well. Things actually getting started tomorrow night between the Baltimore Ravens and the defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. Also a phenomenal game on Friday in Sao Paulo, Brazil, which I still think is a little bit interesting, but a phenomenal matchup between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Green Bay Packers. But kind of leading us into what is undoubtedly going to be an awesome week 1. Football season officially back. September and football, they always go hand in hand. However, when the calendar strikes September, that also marks when NHL training camps officially open up as well. And we now do officially have a date of when that is going to kickstart for the Chicago Blackhawks. There's also rookie camp beginning next week ahead of the team, or the prospects, I should say, traveling to St. Louis for the Tom Curvers Prospect Showcase. Lots to be excited about whenever the calendar flips over to September, Blackhawks fans. However, before I get into those dates that I just referenced and also the title and thumbnail of today's episode, which is an injury update on Laurent Brossoit, I do have to mention that this is the first episode that I'm recording of Locked On Blackhawks since the tragic passing of both Johnny and Matthew Gaudreau brothers that tragically left us all too soon in an accident that went down late Thursday night before Labor Day weekend had started, and also the day before they were each set to be groomsmen in their sister's wedding, which is just seriously one of the most horrific and tragic things ever imaginable, one of the most tragic things that I can ever think of, and just completely rocked the hockey in sports world and the world all over the place. And just, man, still hard to kind of find the words to describe this situation and to express how to feel about this loss of these two brothers in a situation like that. I could not imagine what the Gaudreau family is going through and what, everyone who is close to them is feeling right now. And also people who know the feeling of what it's like to lose someone close to them due to a result of drinking and driving. And yeah, just again, another reminder. In today's day and age, there is no reason to be drinking and driving with technology as prevalent as it is, Uber, Lyft, You can call one of your friends or family members. Taxis are even still a thing out there, right? Like, no reason to be drinking and driving. And it's just, yeah, hard to wrap your head around how someone's selfishness can take away the lives of two unbelievable young men at a young age. Forget what they did as hockey players. It's beyond clear based on just the outpour of support that people, pictures, memories, video clips, moments, all the support that the entire Goudreau family has gotten during this tough time. It's clear just how much these two brothers meant in so many different lives. I mean, brothers, husbands, fathers, in Matthew's case, a soon to be father, uncles, friends, former teammates, right? It's clear that these two touched a lot of different people's lives in a lot of different ways. And also hearing, how close they were throughout each other's lives is just even more heartbreaking, right? Like right alongside each other throughout each of their own journeys. It felt like they were always kind of intertwined, even though Johnny was 2 years older than Matthew. It felt like in reading the stories that I have read, that, while Matthew was younger, he was also a little bit of an older brother to Johnny. And there were stories about how, when Johnny was getting recruited and it was time for him to pick a school to go to in college, he didn't really choose and just said, Maddie, you choose where we're going to go. And even going back to when Johnny Gaudreau at the time, sort of seemingly surprisingly signed with the Columbus Blue Jackets, a huge reason in which he marked in doing so was because it was a good situation for him and his family. And yeah, seeing the post from Johnny's wife and how much it was clear, he loved his kids and enjoyed spending time with them, and seeing those photos, it is just heartbreaking and such a tragic situation, again, that all stems from someone else's selfishness. And, I don't want to go out and like speculate what, not that it matters in any sort of way, but these are just two guys who were out riding their bikes with one another. I don't know if they were, riding around just training because they are both professional athletes and professional hockey players, or if they were just going for a stroll for entertainment, or maybe they were the ones who were, out having a beverage as they're by their hometown and their sister's getting married the next day. I don't know what was going on, but just two young men who are enjoying a nice Thursday night bike ride near sunset get their lives taken away because of someone else's selfishness. It's just so hard to wrap your head around. And Johnny Gaudreau, I mean, like just one of those, Johnny Hockey, one of those players that feels like his persona is like larger than life and like is almost untouchable. And sorry to hit the mic, I'm sure that wasn't great for the listeners out there, but the Johnny Gaudreau sweater, I've had that for 8-10 years now. I mean, didn't take long for him to A, make his mark in the NHL, and to B, become one of my favorite players, and I'm sure lots of other young kids at that time's favorite players as well, from the way that he played the game and the way that he carried himself despite being 5'9", 140, 150 pounds, right? The stories of him gluing pucks to his waist in order to gain some weight and weigh as much as possible at the NHL scouting combine. And for those who have never seen me in person, I am someone who is also 5'0", 100 and nothing. So it was easy to resonate with a guy like that. I've also been a huge Patrick Kane fan, and he was always kind of undersized, and Johnny Gaudreau was the same way, put up elite numbers at every level, but there were always those critics and those doubters who felt like he was just too small to have that success carry over to the next level. And with each level that he rised, he just got better and better and better and put those notions all to the side. I think his kind of rise to fandom began when he was at Boston College and scored that game-clinching, unbelievable goal to bring the title back to BC with just a couple minutes left in the third period. An unbelievable call of the goal, him going forehand, backhand, top shelf to seal it. It was very Patrick Kane-esque of his hat trick against the Vancouver Canucks when he was really solidifying himself. It was, in a different spot on the ice, but almost in the same fashion. And being a big Kaner guy, easy for me to jump aboard the Johnny Gaudreau hype train. He makes his NHL debut after winning the Hobey Baker in 2014. Not a big deal. Scores in his first NHL game, goes on to make 7 All-Star appearances across 11 NHL seasons, emerges as a huge star for the Calgary Flames, an unbelievable player for them. One moment of Johnny as a young player, I remember 2015 Stanley Cup playoffs, Blackhawks had already secured their berth into the next round, and they were set to play the winner of the Flames or the Anaheim Ducks. I believe Anaheim was up 3-0 in this series, and the Flames were fighting for their lives. They were also down a goal in the final minute of the third period. Johnny Gaudreau skates into the offensive zone, literally picks as top corner glove high as it gets to go and tie the game, pumps the crowd up in Calgary. They would still go on to lose that series, but it was clear from that point at a young age that Johnny Gaudreau had the goods. He had the stones to step up in those type of moments and make those types of plays. And yeah, boy, what a special, special career he had that tragically ends too soon at the age of 31. But it was always so fun watching Johnny. You could tell that he enjoyed playing hockey out there, and man, did he prove the doubters wrong. In that 2021-2022 campaign that he had, 115 points in 82 games, one of the best years ever in terms of production at even strength. He, Matthew Tkachuk, Elias Lindholm have been one of that line that year is one of the best lines we've seen in hockey over the last 20 years. And then just off of the ice, you never heard anyone say anything bad about Johnny Gaudreau, Johnny Ham and Cheese. He was just a kid, literally. He looked like a 14-year-old. He ate like a 14-year-old, handled himself like a 14-year-old. But you could tell he loved every second of being himself and being himself in the National League. And man, it's, yeah, like I've said multiple times, just hard to wrap around that Johnny Gaudreau and his little brother Matthew are both no longer here. One final time, rest in peace to both Johnny and Matthew Gaudreau, both gone way, way, way too soon. My heart, my thoughts, my prayers go out to the Gaudreau family, everyone who's been impacted by this incident, and everyone who has also been tragically affected by the impacts of drinking and driving. Yeah, 2 young men that did not deserve to go this young, a day before their sister was set to get married. One of the most tragic things ever imaginable. One of my favorite players I've ever been blessed to watch. Johnny Gaudreau, thank you for everything, man. I would love for some fans out there to go jump in that comment section. Bring up some of your favorite Johnny Gaudreau moments from over the years. The national championship goal and that one that I mentioned against the Anaheim Ducks in the playoffs are two that immediately jump in my mind for me. I remember watching him in person, one of my good buddies who has seats down in the low 100 levels, and being able to watch him warm up and being able to watch him zip around there so up close and personal. Yeah, man, special talent gone way too soon. Rest in peace to Johnny and Matthew Gaudreau one final time here from yours truly at Locked On Blackhawks. Had to start today's episode with a little bit of a tribute to the Gaudreau brothers, but in just a couple moments, I'll try to raise the enjoyment levels of today's episode. Although it's not the happiest bit of news that I have to get into, as I will discuss how the impact of Laurent Brossoit missing a few weeks is set to impact the Blackhawks during training camp and the start of the regular season. But first, real quick, I do got to let you all know about our fine folks over at FanDuel. You've all heard about FanDuel at this point, right? Of course you have. But now FanDuel has something a little bit different for you. Right now, through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a free 3-week trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. And then With a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out of market game. You won't just be stuck with the Chicago Bears, which actually might not be the worst thing in the entire world for the first time in a while, or, the in-market games that are just local markets that you don't really care about. You can avoid all of that by simply downloading FanDuel and visiting fanduel.com/lockedon. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can also cancel anytime, anywhere. And if you're still waiting on those Frank Nazar Calder trophy lines to drop, so am I. I'm thinking they got to be coming sometime here soon. We're just about a month removed from the start of the NHL regular season. I am going to be placing a wager down on Frank Nazar to win the Calder trophy. You best believe it. And if you want to tail me, you can do so by visiting fanduel.com/lockedon right now. Again, it's fanduel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Again, just a quick reminder to hit the like button, comment down below, and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. Thank you very much. And to also check out the Locked On NHL podcast, where the season never ends, providing national expertise with a local perspective. You can find the link to Locked On NHL down in the description, or you can simply search on YouTube or wherever you may be listening to your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Segment 2, as some of you may have heard based on or in the last episode that I dropped, which was a crossover with JD Young from Locked On Sharks. A funny little incident went down in the middle of that crossover, as while I was talking, suddenly JD goes, "Breaking Chicago Blackhawks news." And I'm like, what? What could this be? And he starts with Laurent Brossoit has undergone meniscus surgery on his right knee. And JD also posted this, a clip of this moment up on X. So you might have seen it on there already, but my face goes like completely white and my head just immediately drops into my palm. I'm like, are you kidding me? Before the season even gets started and we're already having bad news. And even more fitting was, a couple of episodes prior, I had talked about my favorite offseason additions that the Chicago Blackhawks made. And there's a lot of them that I do like, but I, in particular, expressed how I believe Laurent Brossoit's addition, in particular, will really positively impact the Chicago Blackhawks. I'm talking the price tag that they got him on for 2 years, giving Peter Mrazek a little bit of breathing room, actually having a competent backup, right? Like, I thought for multiple different reasons, it was going to be a huge addition for the Blackhawks. And to hear that guy, after I had kind of been hyping him up since he signed in Chicago on July 1st, to immediately hear that he underwent meniscus surgery, I'm like, oh my gosh, you have to be absolutely kidding me. Fortunately, though, JD did get into the part where he was only set to miss 5 to 7 weeks because of this injury, which, of course, looking at it right now, has him projected to return sometime near the ending of September, although I'd probably expect the Blackhawks aren't going to rush something like this, a lower body injury for a goaltender, right? You want to make sure they're 110%, especially with Brossoit, expected to be getting a pretty decent amount of starts here for the Blackhawks this season and playing a pretty meaningful role. I wouldn't be surprised, as I've expressed before, if he winds up being the starter for the Blackhawks by the end of the season or at the start of next year, before Drew Commesso ultimately comes up to the NHL level. So to hear he was only hurt for 5 to 7 weeks, very, very good news. However, this still could have some lingering effects on the Chicago Blackhawks. As I said, I'd expect Brossoit to return probably sometime the first to second week of October, right around when the regular season is set to begin. And the Blackhawks are obviously going to have preseason games and they're going to be going through training camp before that point in time. So as far as how this news of Brossoit missing 5 to 7 weeks impacts the Chicago Blackhawks, Well, now they're going to head into training camp, which, by the way, I did mention I would get into specific dates for Blackhawks training camp. That is officially set to begin on Wednesday, September 18th, while rookie camp is set to begin on Wednesday, September 11th, a week prior. And what is that? 1 week right here from today, funny enough. So training camp starts 2 weeks from today. Rookie camp begins 1 week from today. They're going to have two prospect practices down at Fifth Third Arena in Chicago prior to the prospect shipping out to St. Louis for the Tom Curvers Prospect Showcase. But for training camp, the Blackhawks, we now know, are only going to be having Peter Mrazek, Drew Commesso, and Arvid Soderblom healthy. They do have Ben Gaudreau as well, who has recently signed an AHL deal with the Rockford Ice Hogs. 21-year-old who is actually kind of hyped up going into his junior career. He was a third-round pick of the San Jose Sharks in 2021. He's still only 21 years old, but really never found his stride in the OHL. In 3 seasons there, he never posted a goals above average below 3, never even had a save percentage reach 900. So yeah, a little bit of a dicey junior career. However, there were some high expectations for him going into the OHL level. So maybe he's still only 21 years old. Goalies are a little bit wonky. Maybe he's able to find his footing and could stumble into being a decent pro-level goaltender. Maybe the Blackhawks, because of this injury, think about bringing in a veteran netminder in training camp just to give them another active body in there, and looking at some of the vets who aren't signed right now who could possibly fit this description. Alex Stalock, by the way, feels like his playing days are probably over at this point in time. But in terms of like a guy who could just get into a PTO, I don't know if he's in game shape or anything, but he would make sense. Antti Raanta, who has ties with the Blackhawks organization, still isn't signed. Martin Jones, David Rittich are two potential options if the Blackhawks do want to bring in a veteran. However, I still think they're probably going to be okay with Ben Gaudreau. Again, I'd expect Laurent Brossoit to be ready sometime around the start of the regular season. And now if he's going to miss a little bit of time, maybe that inclines them to bring someone in a little bit more. However, I still think if Brossoit is going to be ready right around the start of the regular season, they probably don't. It'll be good reps for Drew Commesso and Arvid Soderblom in training camp. And also, I think it's about that time to give Drew Commesso some action in the preseason and see what he's all about. I believe the Blackhawks I think they play 6 preseason games. Don't quote me on that. It's either 5 or 6, but, give Peter Mrazek 2, give Drew Commesso 2, give Arvid Soderblom one of those starts, or work them in midway through the game or something like that. I don't know, but I feel like the Blackhawks still will be okay going through training camp without Laurent Brossoit. We'll see if they wind up bringing someone in. I would guess at this point in time, it's still unlikely. And while it is a little bit unfortunate that Laurent Brossoit, before his Blackhawks tenure has even officially gotten started, he has to undergo surgery to deal with a meniscus issue. I do feel like we are a bit fortunate here that he is only slated to miss 5 to 7 weeks. Again, I've talked about how I believe he could provide a big impact for this Blackhawks team moving forward. Hopefully he'll be able to return by the start of the regular season. Feels like we dodged a little bit of a bullet here. Here's to wishing for a speedy recovery to Laurent Brossoit. If the Blackhawks do wind up bringing in a veteran goaltender, I have a feeling we'll be hearing about that before things get underway on September 18th at Fifth Third Arena. But there are my thoughts on what Laurent Brossoit's injury means to the Blackhawks as training camp is now just 2 weeks away. Coming up in just a moment before I wrap up today's episode, I still have to get into Leon Draisaitl signing a massive extension with the Edmonton Oilers. Segment 3, Leon Draisaitl has officially broken the bank. A huge extension reported out of Edmonton yesterday. Leon has signed for 8 years with a $14 million AAV, the highest in NHL history. That totals out to $112 million. That is the second richest deal in NHL history as well, trailing only the contract that Alex Ovechkin inked with the Washington Capitals a handful of years ago. And this, of course, officially takes Leon Draisaitl off of the free agent market in the summer of 2025, which is rather unfortunate for us Blackhawks fans. One of the big dominoes, one of the bigger dominoes, biggest dominoes there could possibly be, but one of the bigger dominoes in that mammoth free agent class next summer has officially fallen off the board. And I always felt like if Leon Draisaitl were to hit the free agent market, and I do feel this way about a lot of notable players up front that I believe the Blackhawks are going to have some interest in come July 1st, 2025. Mikko Rantanen is probably the next boy that I'm looking at. And quite honestly, in terms of likelihood, I always thought it was more likely that he was to leave Colorado than Leon Draisaitl was to leave the Edmonton Oilers. Plus, while Mikko Rantanen, I do think is one of the best players in the league, I don't know if he's going to command a $14 million AAV like we just saw Leon Draisaitl get in Edmonton. So quite honestly, Rantanen, who I think is the more likely option, he might be the more affordable one as well. Still, at the end of the day, it does suck that Leon Draisaitl is off the board because I really believe the Blackhawks, the next big thing that they need to get, and I don't know for sure that it's going to come in summer 2025. It just feels like if some of those big time names wind up hitting the market, it just feels like such a good opportunity for them to pounce because I feel like that next thing they need, especially after passing on Ivan Demidov with the second overall selection in this year's draft, is a star forward along with Connor Bedard. And while, I have high hopes that Frank Nazar can be that guy, and while I think the world of Oliver Moore and Gavin Hayes, Ryan Green, I think are going to be good NHL players, I think it's still pretty clear that the Blackhawks need another star up there and maybe even a proven veteran player up on that top line with Connor Bedard. Leon Draisaitl absolutely could have been one of those guys. And with the Blackhawks being an original six team, Connor Bedard's here, all the money, all the draft picks, all the prospects coming up, it feels like, I don't know if there's buzz about Chicago being a good free agent destination right here, right now, but it feels like we're on the precipice of that being a thing once again. So I always felt like if Draisaitl were to hit the market, Chicago would be a pretty good landing spot. That, of course, is now officially off the table. He's in Edmonton for the next 9 years. However, it does come at a cost. Because looking at the Edmonton Oilers on Puckpedia, no longer cap friendly, which is very sad, although I will say Puckpedia is still rather solid. The Edmonton Oilers are in quite an interesting financial situation, right? This $14 million AAV for Leon is really going to handcuff them a little bit. Connor McDavid, 2 years left still at $12.5 million. Zach Hyman, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, they each make over $5 million until what? Both of them, I think, are still signed on through 2028. Darnell Nurse signed on through 2030 at $9.25 million, which I legitimately think is the worst contract in all of hockey. And they still don't have Evan Bouchard tied up long-term. And shout out to Mario Tirabassi from CHGO Blackhawks who put out this tweet on X. Edmonton is now set to enter next year, not the 2024-2025 season, the 2025-2026 campaign. And while a lot can happen before then, at this point in time, they're setting to head into that season with $86 million tied up on their books. And that's before getting a deal done with Evan Bouchard, who's going to be a restricted free agent at the end of this year, who just had a phenomenal Stanley Cup playoffs, has turned into a real special player for them on the back end. Still can't believe the Hawks drafted Adam Boquist over him. He's going to get paid. Salary cap right now is at $88 million. And yes, that is set to go up, but you get the gist. Only 16 contracts on their books. this is going to handcuff Edmonton a little bit. The result of signing Leon Draisaitl to this deal is, at least to me, this season right here, right now, is going to be the best crack that the Edmonton Oilers are going to get at it with this group. Because at the end of this year, whether they win the Stanley Cup or don't, some pieces are going to have to go. That's just kind of the nature of the beast, whether it's them fighting and giving away assets to move on from Darnell Nurse. Matthias Ekholm still has 2 years left at $6 million. They might have to move on from him 1 year early. Hyman, Nugent Hopkins, right? Like, this is a situation for old Stan Bowman, who is all too familiar with having zero wiggle room. And of course, Stan Bowman's the one to give Leon Draisaitl the richest contract in NHL history. I'm sure that won't backfire on Edmonton at all. But yeah, this is going to be an interesting one for the future of the Edmonton Oilers. Undoubtedly, I think this is going to be their best shot right here, right now. And it's going to be rather interesting to see what happens with old Connor McJesus when he comes up in a couple of years. Yeah, the Stanley Cup will still be going up, but Darnell Nurse signed on until 2030. Ryan Nugent Hopkins, Zach Hyman, each here until 2028. We'll see what Stan Bowman, if he's still in power, will wind up doing there. While one problem is solved with Leon Draisaitl, feels like Edmonton has things set in stone now for this season. It's going to be real interesting to see how they handle that moving forward. But that's going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. Unfortunately, Leon Draisaitl, 2025, him signing with the Blackhawks is no longer on the table. I think we're going to be turning our attention to Mikko Rantanen, though, Blackhawks fans. But until the next episode, everyone enjoy the rest of your days. You can find me on X at Jack Bushman 2. Make sure to check out my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey as well for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. Subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. Please, 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 really want to hit 2,000 subscribers before the start of the regular season. And if you haven't already, if you're tuning in through an audio podcast and just stumbled across the show, I'm going to start getting into player previews, bold predictions for the start of the regular season. Lots of good stuff coming here on Locked On Blackhawks. So make sure to follow the podcast for free wherever you listen to your podcast as well. That way you can also jump on and listen to what I'm saying when you're driving to work, on your way back from work, going on long drives, whatever it may be. Make sure to follow Locked On Blackhawks wherever you get your podcasts as well. But until the next episode, everyone, have a great rest of your day. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every